Ever since a few milliseconds after mankind first became aware of death, the concept of immortality has existed. Ancient religions sprung out of this idea, and it wasn't long before eternal life was seen as a punishment or a reward handed down to mortal beings from time to time. Some religions talk of resurrection, others of different planes of existence where the soul resides after death. Christianity, for example, built itself around a prophet who literally rose from the grave with promises of eternal salvation. And now, modern prophets tell us that maybe, just maybe, technology can give us immortality through advanced medical science or digital consciousness. But if it comes to pass that you will never die, what stories would be worth telling? Wouldn't everything become too repetitive and too mind-numbingly boring, with the only thing to look forward to being the inevitable heat death of the universe? History has taught us one thing. If a man runs out of things to do, he will find a reason to fight his fellow man.
A body has been found in a parking garage at Madison Square Garden, and its head was found a few yards away. Forensic scientist Brenda Wyatt is on the case and uncovers evidence that a person of interest, a local antiques dealer, has been alive for hundreds of years. She eventually comes to learn that the man is actually Connor MacLeod, an immortal from the Scottish Highlands engaged in an apocalyptic battle with other immortals. When the most vicious of these, a terrifying being known only as the Kurgan, kidnaps Brenda, Connor must arm himself for a fight to end all fights. And as for victors, there can be only one.
After visiting the Scottish Highlands on a backpacking trip across Europe, the UCLA undergraduate film student Gregory Wyden found himself in the Tower of London. Not as a prisoner, but as a tourist. Looking at a display of armor throughout the ages, he imagined a single person having worn it all, as though the broadswords and pauldrons told the story of an impressive warrior who had lived for hundreds of years. This thought, combined with inspiration from the Ridley Scott film The Duelists, stirred a 20-year-old Wyden to write a script for a class assignment about a shadow clan of immortals living among us and fighting each other one-on-one in brutal combat. His screenwriting professor at the time, the legendary Richard Walter, was such a fan of the script that he encouraged Wyden to send it to an agent, after which it was sold for an astonishing $300,000. Producers Peter Davis and William Panzer ordered a rewrite by Peter Bellwood and Larry Ferguson, and then hired Australian-born music video veteran Russell Mulcahy to direct. Mulcahy's only other film credit was the unconventional cult horror movie Razorback, but he had directed videos for big-name bands including Duran Duran, Billy Joel, Fleetwood Mac, and Elton John, as well as directing the seminal MTV classic Video Killed the Radio Star by the Buggles. Pre-production was underway on what was then called The Dark Knight by the end of 1984, under an operating budget of $14 million. Though by the end that number would reach as high as $19 million. To play the lead role of Connor MacLeod, a few different actors were considered, chief among them Kurt Russell, who turned it down. Eventually, Russell Mulcahy saw pictures in a magazine of Parisian actor Christophe Lambert from the movie Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, Lord of the Apes, that's an exhausting title, and immediately wanted him for the part. Unfortunately, Lambert barely spoke English at the time, and only did so with an incredibly thick European accent. Though there is a line of dialogue in the film that lampshades this as a side effect of Connor's character being worldly.
You talk funny, Nash. Where are you from?
Lots of different places.
Which is fitting given that Lambert spent much of his youth bouncing around Europe with his French diplomat father. Lambert still worked extensively with a dialogue coach for 4 hours a day over the course of a month or two. When not working on his English, he also spent 4 hours a day training to wield a sword, under the tutelage of Bob Anderson, an Olympian sword master who trained everyone from Errol Flynn to Johnny Depp over a long and storied career, along with being such a badass that he was Darth Vader's stunt double. Now, I have a bit of a controversial opinion about Lambert as the titular Highlander, but I'll save that for when I get to my overall opinion of the film. When initially looking for an actor to play Connor, they actually sent the script to the biggest Scottish actor of the day, Sean Connery, who replied that he had no interest in playing the lead, but would be down for playing the mentor character, Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez, which is how you get a Frenchman playing a Scotsman, and a Scotsman playing an Egyptian Spaniard. Connery was paid a cool $1 million for his part, and only worked for 7 days on the project. Later, somebody went to his villa in Spain to record his voiceover for the opening narration, which he actually did in his bathroom for some reason, hence the heavy reverb.
No one has ever known we were among you. Until now.
To play the main villain, the Kurgan, which, by the way, is a real term that broadly defines a whole host of Proto-Indo-European subcultures from thousands of years ago who used ceremonial burial grounds called kurgans for their dead, they initially wanted Arnold Schwarzenegger, who rejected them because he didn't want to play another villain. Mulcahy, who was also trying to find rock musicians to work on the soundtrack, then met with Sting, who told him about Clancy Brown, another big, muscular actor who had played the monster alongside Sting's Dr. Frankenstein in 1985's The Bride, a Frankenstein movie I haven't actually seen, believe it or not. Maybe I'll have to cover it one of these days to make up for that. Brown, who also trained with Bob Anderson, wanted to take the role seriously and play the Kurgan as the character had originally been written by Gregory Wyden, a brooding ancient who had lived for so long he felt life was utterly pointless, only able to go through his unending daily existence by the desire to hunt down Connor and clear a centuries-old vendetta. Mulcahy and the producers, however, pushed the character in a more punk rock psycho direction, and as much as I hate to admit it, for the tone of the movie they made the right call. This version of the Kurgan is brilliant, and Clancy Brown absolutely runs away with the entire film in the third act.
I have something to say. It's better to burn out than to fade away.
But he barely got paid anything for his work, not even earning residuals. Maybe as recompense, he does get to run over the director in the movie. Other notable actors include future Chicago Hope star Roxanne Hart as Brenda Wyatt, a young-ish John Polito as one of the mouthy New York cops,
it's getting like one step beyond.
Yeah.
Hugh Quarshie as Castigear, the film's stunt coordinator Peter Diamond as the immortal Connor beheads in the opening action sequence, perennial Scottish actor James Cosmo as Agnes MacLeod, Nicholas Roeg's son Waldo Roeg as this German soldier, and a handful of real professional wrestlers in the opening scene, which was filmed in New Jersey's Meadowlands Arena. The script actually called for this to be a hockey game, but the NHL didn't want their sport associated with wanton violence. Filming on Highlander began in May of 1985 on a breakneck 12-week schedule that included location shooting in 4 different countries. The sets were built at Jacob Street Studios in London, and some London locations doubled for New York, including an Earl's Court fruit market that was turned into a parking garage, an alley in the Docklands made up with goofy American-style graffiti, a tobacco factory, a church in Kilburn, and an abandoned hospital. New York City itself was used, though, for much of the street scenes and parts of the Silver Cup Studios battle, done at the actual studio rooftop. More location shooting was done in Scotland, particularly at Ellendonnan Castle, where the parking lot was covered up by an entire village, along with Glencoe, where most of this battle was staged and where the extras were paid in Scotch, the Silver Sands of Morar, and the Isle of Skye. Finally, this closing scene was shot somewhere in Wales. It was reportedly a difficult shoot, with a lot of competing creative visions, a tight schedule, and producers hell-bent on keeping down costs. A lot of clever tricks were used for the effects, such as wiring the actors up to car batteries so their swords would spark, and many scenes were shot guerrilla style, skimping on all those pesky permits. One place where the budget wasn't too hamstrung was on the soundtrack. The score was composed by Michael Kamen, who deserves a lot of recognition for his work here, but the movie is most well known for heavily featuring songs by the band Queen, almost all of which were written for the film. Other bands were considered, including David Bowie, Duran Duran, Marillion, and the aforementioned Sting, but Queen was Mulcahy's first choice for their quote-unquote anthemic songs. Who Wants to Live Forever, written by Brian May specifically for the scene in which it appears, has gone on to become one of the band's most popular and most covered power ballads, with the Sarah Brightman version standing out as my favorite. Full disclosure, I've been listening to Queen the entire time while writing this script. Highlander released in the US in March of 1986, with the roughly 8-minute longer European version releasing in the UK in August. It had mixed reviews that praised its stylishness while simultaneously criticizing it as a borderline incoherent mess. It also underperformed at the box office, earning a worldwide gross of $12.9 million, not nearly enough to recoup its budget. However, it did much better on home video and would earn a cult following both in the US and in Europe, leading to a plethora of confusing sequels, a television series, books, comics, and more. A long gestating remake is supposed to start filming in a couple of months, with Henry Cavill set to star and Dave Bautista heavily rumored to be playing the Kurgan. Before you ask, I'm staying stubbornly neutral on it for now. Because here's the thing. I have a lot of nostalgia for this movie, and I do watch it fairly regularly as part of my rotating collection of 80s favorites. Always go with the longer European cut, by the way.
Nein! Erst musst du mich erschießen!
Whatever you say, Jack. You're the master race.
But honestly, it has some significant flaws. The first one I already teased. Christophe Lambert is, in my opinion, terribly cast. I mean no disrespect to the actor, but his take on the stoic, world-weary hero is just bland, and he has absolutely no chemistry with Roxanne Hart. There are a couple of scenes where he shines, like the emotional gut punch of Heather's death, but on the whole, I just don't buy him, especially when you put his more nuanced and realistic character up against the bombastic Ramirez and Kurgan.
Mom!
But I can already see the comments coming in to defend Lambert, so I'll move on. My other big problem with the movie is its muddled narrative themes. It's an ambitious story, and the core of it should be about the uselessness of a life without end, which from the sounds of it is what the original writer, Gregory Wyden, had in mind. However, that theme gets lost in a lot of bombastic silliness that, while entertaining, doesn't have much to say aside from violence is a thing that exists. Brenda manages to get one line in about Connor being afraid to live, but that doesn't feel earned because the movie just rushes past it to get to the next action scene.
Most people are afraid to die. That's not your problem. You're afraid to live.
I also think the directing is uneven. The MTV editing and wildly sweeping camera pans make for a cool, stylish atmosphere that works for the most part, but the quieter scenes are uninspired. The dialogue is also bizarre, as though every character is, at all times, trying to come up with an action movie one-liner.
Don't move, pal. Don't even breathe.
Part of me wants to blame a certain powdery substance for that, but I have no evidence to back up such a claim. Anyway, I don't want to leave it there, because, like I said, I still love this movie, and I don't think it's just nostalgia that draws me to it. The story is a modern myth that feels both unique and timeless, and the movie is a brilliant snapshot of the kind of off-kilter filmmaking that made 80s action movies so great. Highlander has stood the test of time, despite its flaws, and there's a reason an entire franchise sprouted from its foundations. Say what you will about that franchise, but I, for one, remain an eternal fan.
There can be only one.
And that's all for today, my fellow Earthlings. What did you think of Fantasy February? Should I do it again next year? Let me know in the comments, and while you're down there, do me a solid and hit those like and subscribe buttons. Thank you for watching, and until next time, when we'll go back to a different franchise that was rebooted with Henry Cavill, this is the Unapologetic Geek, telling you to never be ashamed of what you love, as long as you're not hurting anybody.
Hi, I'm Candy.
Of course you are.